So, the FIDE World Rapid Championship has come down to this. We have 3 players tied for first place, and we had to go to tie breaks. And in the end, the top 2 players on tie breaks, Vishy Anand and Vladimir Fedoseev, will play 2 3-minute games to decide the winner of the World Rapid Championship. Unfortunately for Jan Nepomniachtchi, he will end up 3rd. He had the worst tiebreak, so he won't get a chance to win the title. But okay, 2 3-minute games. I believe it was 3+2 actually. And Anand had first in the white game. Had white in the first game. Yeah, before we go, I would like to apologize for not putting up more videos today. I've just been really sick, alternating between my bed and my bathroom. But I want to finish the commentary on this tournament, so I will cover here the final tiebreak games between Anand and Fedoseev. So Anand had white in the first game, and he opened with his beloved e4 and went for the gioco piano. Bishop c5, castles, knight f6, d3, castles. Everything is quite normal here. c3, d6, bishop g5, and now h6. And it goes back to h4, and now g5. Fedoseev had some problems in the 11th round on the black side of a gioco piano when his opponent sacrificed on g5. It was not exactly in this position, I think, but it was a similar opening, and that was a really exciting game that I think I will hopefully add to the channel. But for now, let's focus on this one. Bishop g3 by Anand, king g7, and quite early in this game, I felt like we could tell who had the experience. Anand was moving very confidently at an even pace, while we could see that Fedoseev, I mean, this is his first chance at glory really, and he was more visibly nervous and took longer on his moves. So knight b2 by Anand, a5, a6 has been seen before, but a5 is logical as well, stopping any expansion by white on the queen side. Rook e1, bishop e6, and Anand prefers to keep the bishop. If, for instance, this is not an option, because black will take with the f-pawn, and these double pawns are okay, we can imagine an expansion like queen e8, knight h5 to f4, and black will be just fine, especially with this strong bishop on the diagonal. So this is a big no-no, so Anand prefers to keep the bishop with bishop to b5. We see bishop to a7 from Fedoseev. He is preemptively moving the bishop away from any tempos with the d4 move by white. And now Anand takes on c6. This of course moves the defender of the d4 square, so now he can play d4. So now we have pressure on e5, and Fedoseev went with knight to h5. If, however, he tries to get aggressive by trying to win the d4 pawn with a move like g4, unfortunately we can switch in, flick in this move here, and this move doesn't have the desired effect, so all it will do is weaken the black king side. And here Fedoseev decided to sacrifice a pawn for the bishop pair. He played knight h5. Anand took an e5. Fedoseev interposed, knight takes g3, d takes e5. And now white has to accept the pawn, otherwise black would simply protect the pawn, let's say with f6, and have the bishop pair and attacking chances on the king side. So knight takes e5 is more or less forced. And here probably Fedoseev missed the best move. He played queen to f6. On the other hand, it's not so easy to find the move for white after queen to d6. point, of course, is now if the knight moves, we can move. We can use the position of this bishop here nicely with queen takes g3 because of the pawn of the pin on the f2 pawn. And I actually don't see a way for white to avoid this. I think if he plays this knight, we can play g4, which seems to me like it wins material. Point is now if the knight moves, we take on e5, and if you try to interpose queen takes, well, then you got two guys hanging here, so you can't save both of them. So you have to gobble up some pawns and hope you have enough compensation, which you want. So objectively, the pawn sacrifice was probably okay, but Fedoseev didn't follow it up correctly. He played queen f6, and now Anand is in the driver's seat. He retreated with his knight, bishop rook d8, queen e2, and now g4. I felt perhaps h5, h4 at some point was more natural, but it goes with g4. And now an excellent decision by Anand. He decides to give back one of his pawns, plays knight to d4, and this more or less forces black to take on d4, which he did. So now the pawns are equal, but Anand has an excellent pawn structure, and he can attack these weak pawns on the black side, and even this one is not ideal because the bishop is the only defender of the pawn. Anand took advantage of that immediately with knight b3, and now if the bishop takes, he will interpose queen takes g4 check, and he will win a bunch of pawns. Queen b4 by Fedoseev, and now Anand just improves on every move. Rook a to c1, rook to the open file, pressure on these pawns. Fedoseev flicks in a4, but this gives the knight the excellent c5 square, a beautiful outpost, and he's playing on the black squares here. Once again, if you take here, you will lose the g4 pawn. So Fedoseev tried bishop c8, and now a3. And we see total domination of the position by Anand now. He's dominating on the black squares. He has a dream knight here against a passive bishop, and he can build up at his leisure. Actually, queen c2 was a fine move here by Anand. And after rook e8, he simply won the pawn on a4. King g8, the knight comes back. Now it's just up a pawn, and his opponent is getting down on the clock. Rook e5, more confident moves by Anand, simply protecting the knight. e4, rook d to e8, and as he played that move, Fedoseev ran out of time, and Anand won. He has a completely won position here. He can just play around, you know, any move that protects b4, for instance, and then play a4, a5, and this pawn will run pretty quickly, and black has nothing but weaknesses and almost no counterplay to speak of. So a nice win by Anand, 1-0 in the match. So now he needs a draw with the black pieces to hold on and win the World Rapid Championship. Let's see what happens in that one. So now we move on to the second game in the tiebreak. Fedoseev with white and Anand with black. Anand, having won the first game, only needs a draw to become Rapid World Champion, to add to his impressive already resume. Fedoseev went with knight f3, d5 by Anand, and we use a different board color for this one just to differentiate from the other game. g3, and Anand plays knight f6, bishop d2 and c5. Very principled play by Anand. He's arguing, okay, I'll just play like I'm white with d4 and c4, and argue that with even without the extra tempo, that he can equalize against anything that white is going for here. White castles, knight c6, c4, and now the principled d4 move. Holding on to the space, e3. Now play is starting to resemble but only with colors reversed, and Anand goes with e5. After e takes d4, he takes with the e pawn. It is also possible to take with the c pawn, but he takes with the e pawn. And he already has great experience at this line, having played it against Kramnik in 2013 and Caruana in 2016. With colors reversed, this is considered a not so dangerous line, but when you play it with black, you're very close to equality, so it seems like a good choice by Anand. d3, bishop comes to e7, bishop to f4. Normally white would try to play knight to e5, exchange off this knight, and the hope then is that this bishop becomes active on the diagonal. Anand calmly castled, rook e1, and now knight h5. Here Fedoseev went back to c1. Bishop d2 also comes into consideration, because on d2 you're helping to prepare some b4 push in the future, but he went to c1. And now Anand showed that, okay, you know, you have to try something. I'm black, I only need a draw, so I offer you the repetition, knight f6. Of course, white has to win, so he can't go back with the bishop to f4, so he has to try something else. He goes with knight to a3. The plan is usually put the knight on c2 to facilitate b4. a6 by Anand. Knight to e5 finally. Anand took and naturally kicked the rook away and improving the bishop a little bit. Rook went back to e1 and rook b8. So now Anand can even think about b5 in some cases, also b6 if he wants to be solid. Knight c2 by Fedoseev. And here b5 is definitely an option, but Anand stays solid. He plays h6, just preventing bishop g5. If we can make the arrow work. Just restricting his opponent's pieces. And now Fedoseev has to try something, so he goes for b4. Anand plays b6. He's not taking this because then white will probably be able to take on d4. Maybe not immediately. Yeah, there might be a nice tactic with bishop e5 and queen takes d4. But there's no rush to take this pawn. You can even build up with queen d2, bishop b2, and then attack this pawn. And once you win it, you have a nice central presence with your pawns. So Anand did not want to go for that. And after b4, he played simply b6, trying to stabilize his pawns in the center. Fedoseev took, played bishop a3, queen a5 from Anand. He's well in control. He's really got no weaknesses to speak of, and he prevents queen d2, which was a natural move. So now what to do for white? He went with queen to c1. This protects the bishop and introduces a little bit of a threat. If black is careless, let's say with a blank move like bishop d7, and this is a variation, so let's make it a variation color. Then knight takes d4 shows the point of queen c1. This bishop is undefended, and you can't take on d4 even because bishop takes on d6. So Anand had to show a little care here, and of course he managed to do that. He played rook d8, defending the bishop, so no more tricks on d4. So one would think, but here Fedoseev goes for perhaps a little bit of desperation, but he's trying to do something. He has to win, and this game's not going his way, so he went with knight takes d4. A crazy idea, but it just doesn't work. He took on d4, bishop takes d6, rook takes, and queen to f4. Now black should have some options here. What Anand did is fine. He went with queen c7, simply protecting both the rooks that were in the line of fire. c5 from Fedoseev, and these moves happened really fast. And Anand simply played rook d7, but I mean, he can safely play queen takes c5. Let's say what, rook c1, just go back to b6, and nothing really happened, and there are no threats. Should just be an easy win for black. But Anand kept it solid. He played rook d7, c6, and now he should have played rook d6 here, just keeping control, but now white all of a sudden gets a little bit into the game with a very nice move. He doesn't recapture the queen, He plays an excellent move here. C takes d7. And yeah, here for the first time Anand had to think a little bit, because this was a little bit surprising and I'm sure he missed this. A very nice idea by Fedoseev, but unfortunately it's not enough to threaten Anand. He goes back to c7. Now rook e8 check. Of course, if you take it, I take and make a new queen. But Anand found a nice way to deal with this. He played king h7, allowing d8 queen. And now he takes on e8 because he's covering the queen. So in this way, he's actually gaining some time. So after queen takes e8, now it's black's move here. And Anand wastes no time. Bishop f5. Discovered the attack on the queen. Queen goes back to a4. And now queen c3. A nice move by Anand. Attack on the pawn and the rook. Rook comes to d1. And there's no reason not to take on d3. Protects a6 as well. So Anand did that. And now Anand is back in full control. And he just snuffed out all counterplay here. Played rook b1. Nothing to be done really for black, for white. He has to change the rooks, and now Anand is just up a pawn. It's a pass pawn. He can't lose this. The best white can hope for is a perpetual. But now the bishop simply comes back to g6, covering everything, and the d pawn is ready to run. After bishop takes f7, Anand took. He gave Fedoseev a check on e1 and played d2. And here, according to the broadcast and the official game score, Fedoseev resigned and Anand won the title. But as it happens, white has a perpetual here by playing queen f5. You can have a look at that, but it's not really important. I mean, a draw would not do anything for Fedoseev, but as you can see, there's no way for the king to penetrate over to the e file. Something like this: queen d6, king f5, etc. Whenever you interpose the queen, I take on d2. So nonetheless, a pair of nice games by Anand. He played tremendously throughout the tournament. I think he went through it without losing a game, and he is a worthy World Rapid champion, showing that there's still blood running in the tiger from Madras. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the coverage from this tournament, and I hope my health improves so I can continue to follow the Blitz tomorrow. But in any case, I'll see you in the next one.